When I look at banking, to me, banking is a fully commoditized service industry. If you want to make it very simplistic, banking is essentially you have two products. You either give money or you take money. If you want to make a difference in banking, it has to be in the customer experience. Mm-hmm. To get customer experience right, you need to understand your customer. I think what we have been able to do at Commercial Bank of Dubai, there was a very good team that I found when I joined the bank about 5 years ago. What we have been able to do is to make that team even better. Mm-hmm. And when you have the right team in place, then you are able to provide the experience that really makes a difference.
This show is produced in collaboration with Ardian, a reliable end-to-end payment solution that enables businesses to turn payments into a strategic growth driver. We're also brought to you by Lulu Financial Group, a global financial services provider headquartered in Abu Dhabi and operating in 11 countries. Finally, Couchonomics with Arjun Singh is brought to you by M2P Fintech, Asia's leading payment infrastructure company that enables businesses of any scale to embed financial products. Welcome to today's episode of Couchonomics with Arjun Singh. I'm your host Arjun, and I'm joined by Dr. Bernd van Linder, who is the CEO of Commercial Bank of Dubai. Bernd, welcome.
Thank you, Arjun. Happy to be here.
And I have got this corny question I have to ask you. I hope you're comfortable on the couch.
Very comfortable.
Right, great. So Bernd, we have a 30-minute time slot to do this show. So it's kind of straight into the deep end. But where I'd like to start is a bit of a personal story, if you wouldn't mind, right? I was reading about your background, and from what I understand, you have a PhD in artificial intelligence. And if I may say so, during a time when most people didn't know how to spell artificial intelligence. So talk to me a little bit about this transition from being a doctor in artificial intelligence to becoming a CEO of a bank.
Yeah, it's a good question. Back in 1996, when I did my PhD in artificial intelligence, you're absolutely right. There were not too many people who knew what it was. There were even fewer people interested in it. And to be honest, that didn't change for about 20 years. I think for about 20 years, nobody wanted to talk about my PhD. Nobody was interested in what I had done. Then somewhere around 2015, 2016, people started to talk about AI, in banking. And I remember there was one conference here in Dubai, which was about banking, and all the questions I got were about AI.
Wow.
So yeah, that was sort of the point where it really all
were they
all
intelligent
changed.
Questions?
They were extremely intelligent questions.
Right.
It's so no. As to myself, I finished my PhD in AI, but I had already decided early on I didn't want to have an academic career. I moved. First did some work on designing user interfaces at Philips Electronics. Then became a project manager at Philips Electronics, moved as a project manager to ABN AMRO, and that's sort of the start of my banking career about 25 years ago.
And now you are CEO of CBD.
And now I'm CEO of CBD. And
you did have a stint in Saudi Arabia too.
I had a long stint in Saudi. I spent a little over 10 years with Saudi Alandi Bank, yes. Later Al Awal, and today part of Saab. Started there as the treasurer, and after about, I think, 2.5 years, became the CEO and managing director of that bank. I had a very good time in Saudi, really very pleased with what I've been able to achieve there, and I'm having an equally good time here at Commercial Bank of Dubai.
Excellent. Now, there is a joiner question on this. You have a PhD in AI. Banks are starting to embrace AI, some more faster than the other. How much is your PhD actually influencing Commercial Bank of Dubai's own AI strategy?
It's interesting. It's definitely helping me as a person or as an employee. I think what I've learned from doing my PhD is to not be afraid of problems, to look at problems sort of objectively. I'm quite good at analyzing a problem and coming up with at least a set of possible solutions. And that has helped me over the past 25 years in banking, and it's still helping me today. Applications of AI in banking, probably not as many as we are going to see over the coming years. The way that I see it today, AI is essentially machine learning.
It is.
Deep learning, but deep learning I haven't seen a lot of in banking, but it's machine learning. And machine learning, if you want to be a bit provocative, is pattern recognition. So where do you see applications of AI in banking? Where you can recognize patterns, large amounts of data, trying to find a pattern in their data. Transaction monitoring for fraud, compliance, AML type reasons. That's where you find applications of AI today. Marketing, micro-marketing, recognizing patterns. If you have a big enough client base, another application of AI. I think you could use AI in underwriting for loans, definitely on the retail side, where again you have enough data to come to some patterns. We're not doing it today, but it's definitely a trend of something that I do expect to happen in the coming years.
No, I do agree with you. I think if there was a half a dozen, I guess, technologies which I think will drive this shift in banking, I think AI would be up there in the top three. Right. And as you said, I think the use cases will become, I guess, plenty as people get more comfortable. There is more practitioner experience. I think there are some benefits which are driven, and it stops being a theoretical exercise. I'm not an AI PhD, but I've been fascinated with the topic for the last 2 to 3 years, I guess partly because the trade I'm in. You need to stay ahead of the curve ever so slightly. But I do think, and I think it's very interesting to have a CEO in a bank who does have a strong appreciation of something which is going to be a catalyst of change. So I think it's going to be interesting. We're going to keep a close eye on you, right? I must congratulate you. As a matter of fact, I did congratulate you on LinkedIn too, on being awarded by Forbes as one of the leading banks, or the leading bank in the UAE. I'm sure you must be very, very proud of it.
I'm extremely proud. It's interesting. We used to have as our strategic ambition that we wanted to be the best bank in the UAE.
Yes.
And the fact that Forbes came out and said, you are the best bank in the UAE, I think it's a massive recognition for all the hard work we've done at CBD.
Yeah. And I think the question here is, I'd be very keen to understand what have been, since you took over as CEO, right? I've only known you for just over a year in person, right? But obviously your time at CBD, Commercial Bank of Dubai, obviously started a lot before. What has been the building blocks of the, if I may use the term, and apologies, the new avatar of Commercial Bank of Dubai, which has come under sort of your leadership, right? Which has led to this recognition.
When I look at banking, to me, banking is a fully commoditized service industry. If you want to make it very simplistic, banking is essentially you have two products. You either give money or you take money.
Yep.
Yeah, setting aside some advisory business. It's completely commoditized. So if you want to make a difference in banking, it has to be in the customer experience. Mm-hmm. To get customer experience right, you need to understand your customer. You need to have the right processes in place. You need to be supported by the right systems. But to me, it ultimately all comes down to having the right people, having the right team in place. Without the right people, you will not be able to provide the customer experience that ultimately will make the difference. I think what we have been able to do at Commercial Bank of Dubai, there was a very good team that I found when I joined the bank about 5 years ago. What we have been able to do is to make that team even better. Mm-hmm. And when you have the right team in place, then you are able to provide the experience that really makes a difference. When I talk to our customers today, and in fact, it's interesting, the Forbes Award was not just about financial performance. It was about customer service, feedback from customers on the performance of the bank. So that I think that's a massive recognition for the work that we've done, which has been focused on providing the best possible customer experience.
No, I totally agree with you. And I think I'm at the risk of repeating what I said when I was actually talking to Olivia Crespin, where I think people and talent matters irrespective of digital banks or not. And I think people actually sometimes underestimate the need of getting the right talent, which in turn drives the culture, which in turn drives, I guess, innovation, which in turn drives performance. I think you need to get those platforms right?
And I think it's even more important in banking. When you look at some other people matter always, and talent is always the most important. I 100% agree with you. But when you look at banking, there is no emotional connection to our product. Yeah, when you look at mobile phones, some people are Apple people. I'm a Samsung person myself, right? There is some emotional connection. With cars, probably even more so, right? Between Mercedes, BMW, Tesla, Lexus, people have an emotional band, an emotional connection to that product. With banking, there's nobody who says I have an emotional connection to a loan or a deposit, right?
Yes.
The products are so commoditized. The difference has to be somewhere else and can only be in the customer experience, in the interaction you have with your customer.
Yeah, I think Steve Jobs said it, right? People want banking, people don't need banks. Yeah. But I'm going to put you on a spot on this, right? So when you look at your talent bank, and as the bank evolves and grows and innovates, and newer challenges come and new ways of thinking, are you starting to look, or have you previously continued looking at a talent pool which goes beyond, if I may say, bankers? Is that something you're embracing?
You have to. It's the only way. It's reminds me of something one of our board members, Mr. Ahmed Julfar, said. He said, if you really want to innovate, you have to make sure you also get the people in the other room. We already have the people in this room. We already have people who think like bankers and who are used to working in a bank and making banks work. We have to get people from outside banking to really change the way that banks work. That's what we try to do. We've been successful to some extent. It's not easy. Because I genuinely believe the war for talent is a big issue. It's a big challenge for all of us. But we have to find the people from outside the industry who will help us to provide the customer experience that people expect. Because the other thing that I'm convinced of is the benchmarks are not set by other banks. The benchmarks are set by an Amazon or a Noon or a Google. That's what people expect. People expect to interact with their banks in a way that is very similar to the way they interact with Apple or Amazon. That to me is the key competition when it comes to customer experience and customer interaction.
And I think that is essential that people start looking beyond their immediate cohort of competition. While they're essential without doubt, because you've got to beat them on the race on a day-to-day, but how you prepare for that race actually needs to think about differently. So, but I'm going to take a step back, right? I'm going to have you look a little back, a little in the past, and then I'm going to request you to look into your crystal ball, right? So people say banking doesn't change. I disagree. I think banking does change. Some of it is not as profound or as bombastic as people might expect it to be. But, we've seen banking evolve over the last 3 to 5 years, even in this region, leave alone globally. And I think you made a couple of interesting points, right? Big tech getting into the world of banking, right? So in your views, 2 or 3 things that have happened in the recent past, right? And you could go as far as 3 to 5 years, but I'll leave it to you, which you think have made a profound impact on what banking will hold in the future. And then I'll request you to flip the coin and say, what are the 3 or 4 things that you as the CEO of a bank are looking forward to, both as challenges and opportunities, which you think will further continue to accelerate the change, accelerate the shift? And by no means am I suggesting that the things of the past cannot be the things of the future, because some of them are in continuum. So sorry for this little awkward of question, but I do want you to sort of look at the, I guess, as they say, the rear side mirror, and then sort of look into the horizon.
I'm going to look a little bit further back, even with your permission. When I came to the region about 16 years ago, I was very pleasantly surprised by the level of services that banks were offering on the ATMs primarily at that time. I came from the Netherlands, a country where an ATM, you can get cash. That's it. You cannot even get a lot of cash because it's very strict in Europe, but you can get cash. I came to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. I could participate in IPOs on the ATM. I could pay utility bills. I could pay speeding tickets. I could transfer money, remittances on the ATM. I was really very pleasantly surprised. And I think at that time, there was sort of this is not necessarily digital, but it was sort of at least an automated interaction with clients. Services were way ahead of what I had seen in Europe. When banks started to develop internet banking and apps in the region, it's sort of they were inspired by what they were offering on the ATMs. And again, the apps were very, very rich. Mobile banking apps today in the region are very rich compared to the services you find at banks in Europe.
Especially compared to the incumbent banks, I mean.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Okay.
So I think the starting point was a very good one. If you then add to that the penetration of mobile phones, because to me today banking is mobile first. That's really, you have to make sure your services are there on the mobile.
Life is mobile.
Life is mobile first. Banking is definitely mobile first. And sort of you start on the mobile and then you sort of deliver whatever you do on the mobile on your other channels as well. So the region had a very good starting point with all these services made available on the ATMs, with a very high mobile phone penetration. And I think today we are actually in a very good position. If I compare the functionality of my CBD app to the functionality I have on the apps with my European banks, it's orders of magnitude better.
Okay.
So our starting point has been very, very good. And it's true for all the banks in the region. So we had a very good starting point. Then we got the effect of COVID. And even though there is not a lot of silver linings to this terrible pandemic, one of the things it did, it sort of accelerated the focus on digital and accelerated the focus on no-touch interaction. So whatever we were doing, we suddenly had to do much more of, much faster, supporting much bigger volumes for a much wider client base. Because it wasn't enough anymore to just offer everything you had digitally to your retail client base. Your corporate customers wanted the same. They wanted to have a zero-touch interaction with the bank. So I think it's really one of the few silver linings of COVID has been this push, this acceleration of digital interaction. And again, with the starting point that we had, the push from COVID, we are in a good position today. And I think that is what has happened over the past years.
No, I totally agree with you, right? So if I may take the I guess the audacity to add to that, I think you're so correct, right? So I came to the region around 10 or 12 years ago. A few things just hit me straight. It was a young population. Smartphone penetration was at an incredibly high level. Even the people who didn't have access to smartphones, their access to telephony and wanting to do things on telephony was greater. Yes, I do agree with you. The ATM machines allowed you a multitude of activities. It was like a bank in a box, if I may use that term, which has been abused and used several times. Couple of other things which actually also added to the whole dynamics was that we were rapidly seeing, and this is not just COVID, rapidly seeing digitization of our lives happening at every step of the way, right? It was, whether it was ordering groceries or, getting cleaners or, mobility or home services. So I think the ecosystem itself was creating this environment where potentially embedding financial services, which I do think is going to be, in my humble opinion, a big opportunity which needs to be unlocked. And I think there are a few things which the regulator needs to do, especially around data sharing and stuff, because I think none of this can get unlocked without that. I think you're correct. I think you're so correct. And I get very excited. I think I get too excited sometimes about this whole prospect that, banking, insurance, or if I may just call it incumbent financial services, has this huge opportunity, right? I talked to a friend of mine the other day about investing, and I know you guys have CBD Investor, right? Robo-advisory, online trading, or what I call online gambling. It's actually bringing a retail investor into the world, which typically was always too far to touch and feel. So I think we're all heading in the right direction. I just hope some of the larger banks do their part in it, because there is a sufficient amount of concentration of, I guess, market share among those. If I look forward now, Bernd, 2 or 3 things might not have come into play. What are the couple of ideas that you think are going to further catalyze, this oil on the fire which COVID provided? What's going to provide the further catalyst in the foreseeable future?
Yeah, I think there's 2 ways to answer it. If I look at banking services today, we still have a lot of work to do. You could say retail is largely done. There's still some work on retail getting front to back right, really get your end-to-end processes right. Corporate has started, but still a lot of work to be done. So I think banks will be busy digitizing their end-to-end existing processes and services to a large extent. At the same time, or in parallel, we have to look at all the other stuff that's going on. We already spoke about AI, machine learning. I think you will see more and more applications of these. Banks in this country, the big banks, are big enough to have all the data that they need to build something on top of that using AI and machine learning. So I think that's a very exciting area of development. I think decentralized finance, it's a big one. It's not easy. It has its challenges. It has its regulatory challenges as well, but it is a game changer. 100%. Distributed ledger technology.
Yep.
I really believe that as a technology, it's massive, and it even applications that are just touched. Yeah, we're still at the service of getting that right. That sort of takes you into the whole space of virtual assets. The fact that Dubai announced the Virtual Asset Regulatory Authority and has said that they want to be the leading center in the world for virtual assets. That again will have a very big impact on banks, and something we haven't even, well, we probably started to think about, but we haven't even started to implement anything in that space. Yeah. So that these 3-4 things, to me, this will be the future of banking.
So that's very interesting. So without taking any names, I was talking to a particular bank in the region, and actually they're embarking on a bit of a I think it's a partly theoretical, partly practical study, but I do think that there's a lot of value. What they're not doing is necessarily doing technology foresight, which I've seen a lot of banks do in the past. What they're actually doing is the implications of that technology foresight. So what they're saying is, let's pick the 6 things, and you've mentioned 3 or 4 of them, and let's start deconstructing them in terms of the immediacy of impact, the nature of impact, the product and customer groups it's going to impact, or I should say the other round, customer and product groups it should impact, and what stance should the bank take based on where their legacy infrastructure is, right? So I think more banks will do that. I don't think they're an exception. I think different people will ask the same question differently, and I think I do think the ecosystem will need to come together, because one of the things which is becoming incredibly clear is I do not think anybody has the intellectual monopoly on any of this stuff, right? Which makes my day job very exciting. Right, so I don't have to necessarily come up against people who have written reams and reams of stuff which is based on real life implementation. Most of it is theoretical. But let me bring it back to you, right? So you're obviously, as a bank, going through adopting digital in every parts of it, right? So you said retail, front to back, you're responding to the corporate piece, right? But like any other bank, I don't want to say it's an obstacle, but it is a challenge. There is the legacy IT and technology infrastructure, right? What should banks, and again, I don't want to make this a commercial Bank of Dubai question, but I think you as a leader in this sector, and I'm sure you interact with your fellows, what should banks be doing in terms of deploying their resources smartly to get the greatest bang for buck on digitization?
And almost by definition, right? The legacy infrastructure is a given. It's there. It has been supporting the bank well over many years. It's able to support massive numbers of customers in their day-to-day interaction with the bank. It's able to support things in real time and all of these good things. The key to me is to open up that legacy infrastructure. And priority number 1 in that sense is to make sure you have your right layer around it. You have the APIs around your core infrastructure. Those APIs are important for your development within the bank, because it will speed up your development massively. They are very important when you work with fintechs or other partners to have clear and well-defined APIs. They are very important when it comes to open banking at some point, right? Because again, the starting point to me of open banking is to make sure you have your clear and well-defined APIs available. So I think priority number 1 is to make sure that your legacy systems are in such shape that you can build a layer of APIs around them. That has to be the bulk of your investment. Once you have that, you also can get in all the other partners in the ecosystem to make sure you keep on developing on top of that without being limited by what's underneath.
No, and I agree, and I love what you just said, because one of the things I think I was on a recent podcast where I was on the other seat, and actually one of the things I do recommend all my banking clients, friends, colleagues is that specifically with regards to open banking, open finance, and open data, we don't have to wait for regulation to tell us what to do, right? Because I'll tell you what will happen is once the regulation comes, let's be honest, the management team is going to be first worried about compliance, right? So if there are things that you can do to build towards that whole definition of open banking, open finance, because let's be honest, there's more than 50 countries across the world which are implementing. So our version in this region of open banking, open finance is not going to be so uniquely different, right? It's going to be fairly similar. So I think it's very progressive to hear that. But you also have opened the door for me with regards to fintech, right? Now, I'm well aware of you, of the bank. As I said, I've had a relationship with the bank. I've had the fortune of actually advising you last year on a specific topic. You're obviously worked with a number of fintechs. Two which comes immediately to mind is one is Now Money, where you are addressing a very, very specific need around, I guess, the underserved segment. And I think within that, there is an SME angle to it too. The other was a more recent partnership with Investor, which is in the wealth tech space. What is the bank's strategy in terms of fintechs? Friends, foes, both? How does the management team get together and without spilling the secret sauce here, how do you guys look at this whole fintech scene in the Middle East, and how do you want to kind of maximize the opportunity for the bank?
There's two more you didn't mention. We're also working with Tunes,
Yes, you
payment
are.
rails.
Yes.
And we're working with Intuition in our transaction monitoring, which is,
Okay.
it's another fintech. To me, it's probably impossible for any bank, even for a bank like JP Morgan. It's definitely impossible for us to do everything ourselves. If we can make use of sort of the collective capability of this fintech scene, then it's something that we have to do. So we've been very open to this from the beginning. And we realize that these fintechs offer us something that we don't have. In the case of Now Money, a very clear focus on a certain target customer group, making sure you serve them in the best possible way. In the case of Investor, the robo-advisory, first robo-advisory in the Middle East, if we would have to develop something like that ourselves, it would take forever, if we would be able to do it. Mm-hmm. And even there, I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure if we would be. So they offer a specific functionality. I think equally important, Arjun, they also offer us a certain way of working that's new to us.
Excellent.
Yeah?
Yes.
The way they work, their agile development style, their focus on MVPs, on sprints, on quick delivery. It's something we were doing internally as well, but they sort of taken it to the extreme compared to banks. And you get some nice, I wouldn't say clashes, but some nice tension between the way that they, and a very healthy tension, because it makes both sides better. Because we have something to offer as well to these guys, right? We have hundreds of thousands of customers that we've been servicing for many, many years. We have the trust of our customers, and we know how to operate in a very regulated environment. And that's not easy. That really is something that these players have to get used to, because when you work in a heavily regulated environment, it puts certain requirements on the way you do things yourself as well. So to me, the fintechs that we've worked with, and we for sure are going to work with more fintechs in future, they really have added something to us that either we couldn't do ourselves or that we definitely couldn't do in the timelines that they provided us.
So Bernd, can I put you on the spot? What do the fintechs not do well in the way they engage their banks? Do you have a view?
It's probably unfair to say that they don't do it well, but
or what can they do better?
Yeah, I think they have to be aware at all times that we are a heavily regulated institution. We want to and we have to meet requirements when it comes to customer protection, when it comes to know your customer, anti-money laundering, sanctions monitoring. We have to do that, and we will do that at all times. There are certain things you can never compromise on. Yeah, you can have an MVP that compromises on elements of the user experience or this kind of things. For sure, I understand it. You can never compromise on compliance with regulations. And that's something that a fintech should be aware of at all times. I spoke to some of the guys, the founders of these companies, and they get a little bit frustrated now and then with the banks, right? They say, okay, you move fast and you're still focused, but it's still way slower than we are able to do things. And they're right, but there is a valid reason for that. Yeah, we're moving as fast as we can, but not faster.
So it's interesting, right? So me and a couple of, I guess, we call ourselves commentators because we're neither bankers nor are we fintech founders. We've started this monthly soiree, which is about getting 20 to 25 bankers and fintechs together in a social context, right? So that they get to know each other a little bit better. Because I don't think we have a very large cohort of ex-bankers who have become fintechs. So you're right, they don't come with that appreciation of what it means to be bankers, right? And there are not many fintechs who have, or founders who have gone and become bankers. But as a question to you, this is my thought.
It's a good point, right? Because bankers by nature are used to managing risk.
Yes.
Right? You get a certain type of people that want to become bankers, and these are perhaps not necessarily the same people that want to take the risk of becoming a founder of a fintech, to becoming an entrepreneur to that extent.
I personally think the ones who are able to do both are incredible.
Yeah.
Right? The ones who are able to switch from banking to fintech. I don't know many who have switched from fintech to banking. I'm sure there are cases out there, especially on the technology end of it, but it isn't. But let me ask a question. I think for a bank, this market is sort of slightly concentrated with a handful of banks who have if I may say, a disproportionately large share of the market. Do you believe that working with this very progressive attitude towards working with fintechs, and as you said, you're working with 4 or 5, and there's more to come back. Do you see this as a very key platform of leapfrogging the bank to whatever the next level is, whether it is growth in market share or growth in profitability or entering new segments?
Absolutely. I think when you look at the ones you mentioned, Now Money opened up a new segment for us, supporting people that want to send money back home to their families. Not something that we used to do as Commercial Bank of Dubai. Now we enter that segment with Now Money, and in a much faster and probably in a better way as well as we would have been able to do it ourselves. Investor, we had a very good investment advisory business, but sort of focused on more on the top end, on the personal relationship banking. We now open it up with robo-advisory, with self-investor as well, to a much wider group of clients. So in a way, it opened a new segment for us as well there. So to me, fintechs are really a way for a bank like ourselves to grow faster and to probably grow better than we would have been able to do it ourselves.
Yeah. No, and I do see, just hypothetically talking, I do see, possibly multiple models emerging, right? I was talking to someone at Cross River Bank the other day. I'm sure you're well familiar with what they're doing in the US. They've established themselves as the sort of the marquee BaaS player. Yeah. But if I bring that idea down here, I don't think any bank has to choose between being a BaaS and a non-BaaS. I think you could have a part of your business which is focused on BaaS, while you still run a full-fledged bank on the, adjacently, and you find the synergies. Let's switch to my favorite hobby horse. Sorry, this is sort of Arjun's 5 minutes, which is SMEs. And I think I've spoken to you in the past about this also, right? So in numbers, and I'm going to get this horribly wrong, but they employ 90% of the workforce, right? They constitute anywhere between 50 to 60% of the GDP. They are 99% of all the businesses in the UAE. We have 60 banks, if not more, several insurance companies, but these poor guys have been underserved, right? How do we change that? And what is CBD trying to do to change that?
You're 100% right, whether it's 99 or 95%, the numbers don't matter. It's a very important part of the economy, whether it's economic growth, employment, and everything else. So I 100% agree to that. It's a difficult segment for banks to get right, and it's a difficult segment for banks to get right by themselves. It's an easy segment to bank. It's a more challenging segment when it comes to financing. given the importance of this segment for the economy, I personally believe it's one of the key areas where you can have where you probably need to have a public-private partnership.
Okay.
I do believe, and I worked with these type of schemes before, a guarantee scheme, which is, it can be partially funded by the banks, partially by the government, by the public sector, which sort of guarantees part of the exposure to SMEs, probably in certain strategically important segments as well, because I wouldn't expect the government to just finance across the board, but in certain strategically important segments where banks still take risk, because I don't think any of these schemes should take the risk out completely. So banks still have to underwrite, and banks are responsible, accountable, liable for the first loss. But if things go wrong, if the company cannot be saved, because these things happen in the SME space, you know that as well as I do, then the government steps in for a partial guarantee. I've seen the scheme work very well. I think you have to make it sort of a combination of carrot and stick as well. You can publicize rankings of banks. This bank is number 1 in the SME guarantee scheme. This bank is number 2, and these banks are not doing anything at all. Yeah, go out, name and shame. I have no issue with that. I think we have several of these schemes already in the UAE, but I think if we focus them, if we make them slightly sharper, this is one of the ways that you really can open up financing to SMEs.
I agree with you. I also think that, you know, with and if I may add to it, is that as more and more of these ecosystems and platform players emerge, right, who are going to be hosting a vast number of these merchants, especially in the online world. And I guess online is, you know, sitting somewhere between 15 to 20%. I do not know which statistic to go with, but it will increase. I think if partnerships between banks and these platforms could be cemented, where the access to data, the cost of customer acquisition going down, the fact that you actually have stickiness, so collection becomes a lesser issue, you start addressing. Because every time we speak to SMEs and every time I've ever run a survey, the number one need actually comes up to being working capital financing, then there's SME financing, and then there's this whole need to help them run their business, right? Whether it's tax, compliance, helping them to be able to open bank accounts more easily, cross-border payments, especially as commerce gets more cross-border. I do think that that's a huge opportunity, and I think you guys, you know, banks like Commercial Bank of Dubai, I think are incredibly well placed, right, to kind of seize the opportunity, right?
You're right, and I forgot to mention it. We have although not necessarily a fintech, it's more almost a big tech, but we have an automated supply chain financing solution, Demica platform. That platform is ideal to sort of identify all of these SMEs that are important to the larger corporates that are present on that platform. And it should make it, and it is making it much easier for us to provide financing to them as well on the back of the relationship they have. So I think you're absolutely right, sort of getting the ecosystem right and using the ecosystem to identify the right SMEs, the ones that are most in need of financing, that are most important to the growth of the economy. That's something that we need to do as well.
Okay. We're running out of time. I've got my last question for you. And sorry I've kept you here so long. So we now have a wave of digital and neobanks starting to enter the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and, you know, please feel free to take a perspective at whatever level of abstraction you want to, right? So we've got Zand, we have Vio, we have Yap, which is a neobank. I think it's in partnership with RAC, if I'm not wrong. How do you see them playing a role in a market where there is no shortage of banks, with all due respect, right? Are they going to catalyze massive change? Is it going to force you to do things differently? Do you see that as something which keeps you awake at night? Do you see that as something which is great for the market? Where's Bernd's mind on all of this?
So in February 2017, CBD launched the first digital-only bank in the Middle East, CBD Now.
Yes, I remember.
And what that did for us as a bank is
I'm actually a customer, by the way.
Oh, very good. It catalyzed sort of the rest of the bank to start thinking in the same way. And what CBD Now has done, it sort of made the whole of Commercial Bank of Dubai a digital bank, at least in sort of a mindset. I am convinced these digital players will do that for the banking system as a whole. And I genuinely believe that this the conventional banks, whatever you want to call them, the banks that are there today, these are the ones that are in the best position to win against this competition. We have the client base, we have the technology base, we are making the investments. We are focusing on the customer experience. To me, every bank today has to be a digital bank in its interaction with its customer, in the way that it uses the data from its customers, in the way that it plays into the ecosystems that are there. So to me, I find this a very welcome development, and I really think it will be something that sort of revives or whatever you want to call it, the whole sector. I welcome.
So you're waiting to take the bull by the horn, as they say.
Completely. I find it very welcome competition.
Let me ask you a segue question on this, and maybe I've got this wrong, right? But wherever I see that digitization takes hold, you start seeing a certain level of consolidation, because everything kind of sort of starts, I guess, converging towards the lowest common denominator, if I may say so, because differentiation becomes less and less, right, as you take the human volatility out of it, right? That must concern some of the banks, right? Because you've had banks who have kind of sat on their bastions and grown on it. Do you see a future of 60 plus banks? I don't know what the number is. I'm sure you have a better number. So if this whole digitization, digital banking really takes hold, you get a few people, new players coming into the mix. Do we see that so-called consolidation thing, which we've heard for last, 10 years I've been here, really happen? Or do you think there's space for everybody, all 60, to exist?
I think you have to offer something different. And the competition will be on the way, given that products are commoditized, on the way you interact digitally with your customer. And again, I think we can learn a lot from the way the digital banks and the fintechs are doing this. And we have to step up. And we will step up. Whether that will lead to more consolidation or not, I think if you have the right focus on your customer, if you provide your customer with the right experience, digitally and in branch across all of your channels, then there's definitely a place for you.
There's a place for you. That's great, Bernd. I want to thank you for coming in, and again, congratulations again on being awarded the best bank in the UAE by Forbes. I think, by no doubt, it is a great accomplishment, and it's not just, as you said, based on just financial performance. There's a number of metrics which leads to it. You've had 5 strong years. I think the bank is going through an interesting transition, which is evolutionary, and at the same time you're doing some progressive matters. Now, I do have a little bit of an inside track, because I know quite a few members of your teams who I do interact on paddle courts and on golf courses with. But no, thank you again for taking our time from your busy schedule. It has been a pleasure.
My pleasure. Great talking to you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So with that's the end of our episode with the CEO of CBD, Dr. Bernd, if I may call him, because I haven't referred to him as Dr. Bernd in the interview. Till the next episode, goodbye and good day.